Hello, and welcome to Timing is Everything, a program of Care Dimensions. My name is Mary Crow, Director of Professional and Community Education at Care Dimensions. We continue with our series of programs for you around hospice, a journey of care, through the lens of the interdisciplinary hospice team. Today our topic is hospice and spiritual care, nurturing the soul. We have the pleasure of speaking with Steve Kohut, spiritual counselor. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mary. Thanks for having me.
I was thrilled to have you on,
My pleasure.
Steve. So, Steve, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your role at Care Dimensions.
Sure. So I am a Beverly native originally, and then after college I found myself out in Central Mass, almost 20 years out there, and I was ordained a deacon in 2017. I had a great career with the telephone company. I retired early after 25 years. And in the midst of the pandemic in 2020, my family and I, we moved back to my beloved North Shore. We're living up in Cape Ann. We love it. And right at that time also, I took a job with Care Dimensions. So it's been about 5 years now as a chaplain, or now referred to as spiritual counselor. And as a spiritual counselor, I work with a team that each client is assigned, a nurse, a social worker, and we work together to provide hospice care along with all the complementaries and backup support. So, you know, I feel like I've come full circle. I've come home to my home, and I've come home in my work as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. So what drew you to hospice care? What makes this work so special?
So I think it's really a culmination of my life's mission, my life's work. So next year will be 40 years I've been in the funeral business, from just starting out helping out to formal education and licensure. But I think what drew me is my commitment to the dignity of death, dying, and bereavement, and the enormous quest that it caused in me to, like, what is it that makes us be the way we are, especially around death, dying, and bereavement. So my work as a chaplain or spiritual counselor has really allowed me to sit with these questions. I think in the 80s, when I first started the formal study of this thanatology, the study of death, dying, and bereavement, I first heard that, you know, we're a very death-denying society. And I think part of that today, it saddens me that I don't think we've moved the needle in the right direction. And sometimes I fear maybe in the wrong direction. No one wants to talk about death, and yet when that happens, here we are.
Right, right. Yeah, it's an interesting that we have a ways to go, don't we? We're certainly not where we need to be yet. It's a shame, because this is something that this is a part of all of our lives, and you know, and hopefully for all of us it will happen later than sooner, but it will be here, and something that is so much a part of our lives that people just feel ill at ease talking about. It's really a difficult thing, and I think that's where the work becomes so important. So that's why I'd love for you to talk about, you know, how do you address spiritual and existential concerns when you're caring for people through their end-of-life journey?
Yeah, so this is probably the most challenging, because you want to carve out a real holistic approach and bring in some tools for those at end of life and those caring for them. And that is really led by active listening, to really carve out a sacred space for people to begin these very open and honest discussions. Usually they're a reality of what's happening. You know, people that may come on to hospice may have been having some struggles medically, so the nursing and the doctors and the medical aspect kind of flows. They've been around or exposed and been under medical care. And when they give themselves onto hospice, and now you introduce a spiritual counselor, a chaplain, that can become very real to them. That is probably the first time they begin to think, we're going to start talking about the heavy stuff. Is this really happening? And to carve out this space and time for them to have open discussions, to allow people to begin to talk about their legacy. They probably never even thought about their legacy. And I think what's really important as a spiritual counselor is we are only with them for a real small piece of their total journey. So we enter in, which is an enormous privilege, of this sacred space where whatever they're carrying, any baggage, any family dynamics, that's all there. We're not going to fix that. And we're not going to attempt to fix that. We're going to honor them and afford them where they're able to go with how much they're willing to explore. And usually it's resistant at first. They want to talk about what it means to them to honor their spirit. Most people that are afraid, it's really not the person that's really in end of life, it's those that are around them. And you see that they're concerned about them, but they want to be understood, they want to be heard. A lot of times it's just really honoring that space of where they're willing to go. And sometimes it takes time. Unfortunately, sometimes we don't have a lot of time. But just being available, just being present to say, you know, how can I best help you? You know, I think we're all spiritual. And I think that's where there's misunderstanding often with the chaplaincy role, the spiritual counsel role, is that people will say, usually upon first introduction, oh, no thank you, I'm not interested, I'm not religious, or I'm away from my religion, or I haven't been religious, and I don't want to get religious. And that's fine, but we're all spiritual. And to honor that, right, to those people that are religious, and religion and doctrine and rites and rituals are important to them, they'll lead with that in their spirituality. But I often think if they would just be asked, you know, the nurses, the doctors, everyone's always saying, you know, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? How are you feeling? And it almost becomes like the infamous New England, good and you, good and you, good and you, without any thought. How about asking, how are your spirits today? You know, really get in touch with that, or allow that an opportunity to do that.
So talk more about that, Steve, the role of spirituality, you know, in this work, because when people hear this word, like you say, it's different, because they automatically equate it to religion, and it can certainly it can be connected, but not necessarily. And I do agree, we're all spiritual beings, but not necessarily not everybody is religious. So can you talk about that role of spirituality and what that means?
And I think there's a great tenet of difference, right? Even though the two that come maybe from the same religious background, they're different, and their understanding. They may share some shared beliefs and practices, but it's different. I love when someone says, "Oh, I don't believe in God." I say, "Well, tell me about the God you don't believe in." You know, just meeting them where they're at. One's spirituality is often, a good spiritual visit is often, we never talk about a God or a supreme being or a ritual or a rite. It's, this is how I'm feeling, and this is what I want to address. Because in the spirituality, usually a lot of stuff becomes very vulnerable. People become aware of maybe some unfinished business. The element of forgiveness surfaces. Maybe they need to forgive themselves or others. And let's be honest, none of us like to really sit with that until it becomes, well, maybe I should do it now. To afford someone in their spirituality to say, I'm here for you. I want to honor what's important to you. Maybe that's through the arts and music, nature, telling their life story. I use that, I'll be in full disclosure, I lead with a life review or trying to get something that's familiar to them.
Talk more about that, Steve, because you know me,
Yeah.
and I love life review.
Yeah.
I think it is critically important, and for everyone,
Yeah.
not just people who are at end of life, but people are doing this type of review throughout their journey. Talk more about it, though, kind of in the work that we do at end of life, and why the life review is what it is and why it's so important.
Yeah, it's just honoring them to tell their story.
Yeah.
Tell me where you grew up, and was that good? Was that important? Are you still there? Is anyone still there? What was your occupation in life? What did you do? What did you want to do?
Yeah.
What's the legacy with your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren? Tell me your greatest accomplishment. Tell me something you still wish you'd like to do. Are you a reader? What's your favorite books? Why do they speak to you? Do you resonate at the ocean and the sea? I mean, I think any of us that live where we are fortunate to live can connect to that.
Yeah.
Simple connections, but meaningful.
Powerful questions,
Yeah.
really, because again, they seem so just conversational, quick. But again, you mentioned a couple, and these are powerful.
Yeah.
When you're asking somebody, in a way, like, tell me something that, how would you like to be remembered?
Mm-hmm.
That is important to people. Yeah, because again, what we hear is not always what we feel ourselves.
Right.
Or what if there was anything that we wish we had done differently in our lives?
Right.
Those are big questions.
Right. And oftentimes we get to the point, the family will often want to say on a sidebar, like, would you help with some of the funeral planning or the life celebration? I tend to lead with that language because language is so crucial, right? Let's honor a life rather than mourn the death. And, I really we share this common desire to learn and bask in knowledge. So all the books we've read, the knowledge, the seminars, the theories, it really comes down to, I feel, that we grieve because we love. And the more that we love, the more that we grieve. And really, the only remedy for grief is grieving. And no two of us will ever grieve the same.
Right.
And I think when we try to put someone in a box or give them a timeline or say, you should be back to some sense of normality, the process will forever change the person.
Yeah.
And that's sacred.
Yes, it is. It absolutely is. Yeah. Tell us about kind of an experience that you've had, somebody that you have cared for, giving us an example of what, again, the work can do in terms of focusing in on somebody's spiritual needs and such.
So I once was visiting a woman who was in a facility, and her daughter was basically in charge of making all her decisions. She had some cognitive impairments. And initially, she wanted to decline the spiritual care visit. And she went right to, my mother's not a religious person. She's been away from her church for a long time. But she agreed at the end, maybe just for a visit or another set of eyes going into her. So I went in her facility, and she was in her room and bedbound, but awake and alert to me. And it came out that she wanted to tell me that she was from Salem and that she grew up in the Salem Common area, and she was asking me if I knew it. And I'm fortunate enough that I had some great aunts that lived in this area, and much of my childhood was there. They were watching me or babysitting me, and I spent a lot of time in my very youth there. And so I asked her, do you remember the popcorn man on the Common that used to have the gas-fired? And she immediately lit up. Now, she probably didn't have some very good clarity of what she just ate or what happened yesterday, but she was able to go back and tell me in more detail about the popcorn man. And then this opened for her an opportunity to talk about the bandstand in the Common and how on Sundays they would have bands and the families would gather. And she just was able to really go in, and she was really illuminated. She was smiling. And she thought it was so wonderful. The daughter followed up with me maybe a day or two later, and she said, I'm surprised, she said, because my mother said, I had a wonderful visit from that guy from Salem.
Oh.
And even though I'm not from Salem,
Yeah.
We had a wonderful spiritual care visit.
Wow.
And that visit was void of any God or religion.
Yeah.
I mean, had she gone there, that would have been great, and we would have, danced that dance.
Sure.
But it was really, and I think it's key to spiritual care, always allow them to lead where they wanted to go.
Yeah. Yep.
And whatever they want to talk about.
Right.
Because they know their spirit. I don't know their spirit. I'm asking them to share it with me.
Right. And I think sometimes, we get so task-oriented that we can actually derail people from what's really important to them because we kind of have our own agenda and we're leading them. So I think that's a beautiful way of doing it, to really kind of let them lead and to follow them where they need to be. More and also you're developing a trust very quickly because this is very personal stuff that you're talking about.
Yeah. And I think we need to have, as spiritual counselors, thick skin, because we do really come in for a very brief time, a very emotional time. And very often we're strangers to them, even though our intentions are sincere and compassionate and good. And we're asking them to really open up to some real heavy items with them. And that's acknowledging really their fear, their anxiety, the unknown, the loss of their autonomy.
Yes.
So those things have got to be very well balanced and respected.
Absolutely.
Even when they say, I'm not ready.
Right.
Maybe it's them, maybe it's their family, but you say, great, I remain available.
Yeah.
And when you are ready, we're here for you.
Yeah. It's so important for people at end of life to know that their life had significance and meaning. It's important for them to be able to work that out. That's why I love Life Review so much. Again, celebrating those things that went well and maybe trying to even have opportunity to rework. People don't always have that opportunity or even feel like that's something that's available to them. And I feel like this is where, again, spiritual care comes in. I call this nourishing the soul, and this is what it does, doesn't it? Really enables people to, again, reflect on. People want to reflect on it. Again, sometimes they don't know if they have a safe space.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Give them the safe space. Let them tell their story.
Yeah. And everybody has one.
Yeah.
If somebody is just willing to listen.
That's right.
And I love that you started this by saying active listening.
Yeah.
And people hear that term and they don't always understand what that means. And you can talk a little bit more about that. But it's about compassionate presence. These are terms that are very important because we think we're good listeners.
Right.
Not everybody is. This isn't something that we were born with. This is something that we learn. So talk a little bit just about what you mean by that.
I think that comes also from my ongoing exposure and education with clinical pastoral education, affectionately called CPE, because it has taken me and what I thought I knew to really expand on this active listening, this sacred space, always allowing them to lead the visit. We may have an agenda and we may think we know what's best and we have all these tools in our tool bag, but where are they today and where are they in this visit? And what's really going on? And so it's always about them. And I'm always amazed at how much a visit where active listening and just allowing the space for them to be heard replenishes my own soul. It really is a sacred privilege.
Yeah, it really is. How do you help people in their end of life come to some level of peace?
Yeah, every one of those situations or every client is really different with that because it's so unique to them. I have a little bit of a prayer that I leave it on with my business card that if they accept it, but it's very generic where words that are contained therein that I assure them that they're not alone and that they're being honored by who they are. They have self-worth and dignity. That I'm wishing them to be at peace with their mind, their body, and their soul, and that they are loved. And it usually goes over pretty well to say, I needed that, or thank you, or it usually relieves also those that say, he's going to pray. I mean, what's going on? And it's usually very safe, but very assuring to the soul and to the spirit, that speaks to that, you're a person with self-worth and dignity.
Absolutely. And I think, and that is, it might sound prayer-like, or meditative in way, but it's really different from that, because I think that that's important. And that's what I love about hospice. And if you heard, we're not saying patient, in this conversation. Right. And that's what I love about it, is that, people are human beings. They're unique individuals, and we just don't use the word patient a lot.
Right.
The other thing too is, in healthcare, I feel like people can get put into that patient role, and that's where there's loss of dignity and self-esteem and all the other things that what you just talked about are so important. So talk a little bit more about that, if you will.
Yeah, I think I was recently in a clinical pastoral education. I think you did it too with one of your workshops, but we watched WIT.
Oh, yes.
And it's a great reminder of these aren't assigned patients with numbers and throwing at them a routine or regiment. To give everyone the dignity of being heard, and that everyone's situation is a little bit different, unique to them, and to allow ways that oftentimes in the routine of our job or work that don't become complacent with things. You're dealing with something so sacred that it's so important to really remember this, to honor this person as an individual, to allow them to express where they are or where they're not. I mean, sometimes someone doesn't want their spirit visited or renewed or refreshed, and they're not ready, and that's okay. That's really okay. Because you'd probably do more damage than good by forcing something that someone's not ready for, or you don't ever want to create any anxiety or fear.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're already there.
Yeah.
So I always say, sometimes people maybe a family member will be apologetic that their family member has declined spiritual care or not ready for us. Say, no, I'm only here to help. I want to make this better for you guys. If they're not ready, they're not ready. I also tell all those that are journeying with their loved ones, spiritual care is very much here for you as well.
Right.
And I think that's a powerful reminder that, the spouse or the child that's really all of a sudden kind of had their life upside, they're all invested in this care, I remind them that they're very much tethered to the journey.
Right.
And that it's having an effect, and we're aware of it, and we're here for you as well.
Yeah. I think that is extremely important too, because a lot of times we're focused so much on the individual that a lot of times people don't feel. They feel like they're on the periphery, and that they're not.
Nope, I bring them right in.
Yeah, you have to. And this is definitely effective. And that's another area where I say I just love hospice so much, is it understands that the whole support network, right? And you say the person, but also family, whoever that is to the person, whoever loves and supports them. So it's important that we do address that as a group.
And some of those dynamics that we end up witnessing, I often question, like, where's this coming from? Is this, mom or dad is now at end of life? Is this behavior because they don't really know how to accept this, or no one's asked them, how are you doing with all this? And it comes out in some I'll never forget, early in my studies I had a great professor who taught us that we're getting into dealing with people after a death, the real meaning of the word cathartic. And he used a real graphic example with a newborn that he had and changing a diaper, but it became very real in the essence that spiritual care and the work that we do becomes very cathartic, and sometimes you are that very first reality that this is really happening to them, and that might just come out at 100 miles an hour at you. and not meant to be personal or
Yeah.
or offensive,
Sure.
but be prepared. You're reminding them by what we do.
Right.
This is really happening.
Yeah.
I didn't ask for this. I don't
Yeah.
want this to happen,
Sure.
but it is happening.
Yeah.
So I thank him for giving me that, and every time it happens, I think of him still teaching me that valuable lesson.
Yeah. That's really important.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I know we're going to need to wrap up, but think about what you would like to leave with the audience before we do that. What's one thing, whether it be around hospice, around end of life?
I just think the whole concept of hospice is, if people really weren't afraid of it or put a negative connotation attached to it, and realize that it is a beautiful and enormous gift, either they give themselves or for the ones that they're caring for, to allow the focus to be on comfort, care, and dignity, kind of backing away from traditional medical modality where those have been tried and the person in their right mind says this is what they've asked for, honoring their end-of-life decisions. Maybe they don't want to be going through extreme measures, but to really be okay and see hospice for the beauty that it is. It's a wonderful gift.
Yes.
I wish people put their loved ones or themselves on it much earlier to get the full experience, the full exposure, the full help, the full care.
Yes. Yeah. And we often hear from people who do come on later that they wish they had
Yeah.
done it sooner, don't we?
So we say that
Yeah.
from love and experience,
Yes,
but
yeah.
don't be afraid of it.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful act of love.
Thank you so much, Steve.
My
It is
pleasure.
such an honor to have you on the show
Thank you,
today.
Mary.
Thanks for being
My
here.
pleasure.
And I want to thank everybody for tuning in to this episode, and look forward with continuing our series on the interdisciplinary team, and hopefully you'll be tuning in for that.
It is an opportunity to be with your loved one for all the one mores or all of the little bit more rather than the last.
And I have met so many families that I think have almost had their life extended, if for sure their quality of life, a longer time being able to enjoy their families at home without being in a hospital by signing on to hospice.
You know, we think of hospice care as something that occurs at end of life, but there's a lot of healing that can happen at end of life. And it's not the healing that doctors or nurses in the healthcare system do. It's the healing that families do by showing up and loving one another.